Come on. Hey there, everybody. It's a nice Wednesday. It's Jim, it's Matt, and last night, Matthew, the first CFP rankings came out, and I'm absolutely certain that you were right on board with what they said, right?
I actually didn't have that big of a problem with it.
Really? Okay.
I really didn't. I feel like a lot of people's arguments, at least with this first iteration, are probably going to be one. I think people probably won't be happy that it's just P4 teams. There's only four conferences represented. And two, in this discussion that I've had already with some friends of mine, is there's some discussion around the top three and maybe people's thinking whether or not you value analytics, how much you value analytics can factor into your thinking as to whether or not they got the top three right. But to be honest with you, could you poke some holes in the top three? Possibly. Is there any point in doing it? No. It doesn't matter. 1 and 2 are going to play each other here in about, I think it's 5 weeks now, somewhere in that neighborhood. And 3 and 4, as things currently stand, are set on a collision course as well. Like, these teams are going to play each other. So for as much as the initial rankings could matter in terms of, I think the initial rankings matter for the sense of you kind of get a feel of the way the committee's thinking. So you got a pretty good understanding of how they're thinking. And honestly, my only issue isn't with the rankings themselves. It's more in the fact that when we get down to it, the way things stand right now is you're going to have, if things were to remain the same, you'd have an unranked team in the college football playoff.
Yeah, it's very possible. And it's odd, but it's very possible. It seemed to me that for the first one, right, it was pretty much less analytics and more eye test.
Yeah, it was. And they had discussed about how they're going to use analytics. And I think to a certain extent, analytics may have played a factor in why you have a Vanderbilt so low and why you have Georgia Tech so low.
Right.
Both of them, Georgia Tech just suffered their first loss. Vanderbilt, I think, suffered their second. So it's something that drops them because they've seen a Georgia Tech team struggle with other teams. They struggled with Clemson, who doesn't look very good. They lost on the road at NC State. They struggled with Wake Forest. So they just haven't been world beaters. They've got a really good record, but they haven't been world beaters in what they're doing. And you pair that along with the fact that their schedule overall doesn't carry the same weight as some of these other SEC and Big Ten teams, then you get a better understanding as to why they are where they are and why you have a Louisville and Virginia that are ranked a few spots ahead of them despite carrying very similar records in the same conference.
Yeah, and the thing to me is, and it's always with these initial ones, right? The between now and 3 weeks from now, that whole thing can be jumbled into a totally different group.
Yeah, it's just there's a lot of football left to play for all of these schools. There's 4 games left on the schedule. Okay, give or take. There could be some late buys in there. There's somewhere in the neighborhood of 3 to 4 games left on each of these teams' schedules. And then for the likes of Ohio State and Indiana, you're looking at most likely a Big Ten championship. The same thing can go for Texas A&M and Alabama. You're looking most likely at an SEC championship if things were to hold firm the way they are now. So you have these teams that, maybe you're like, well, I think Indiana should be above Ohio State. Well, you're entitled to that opinion. I can't make a really good argument for why they would be above Ohio State right now. Ohio State's got a better strength of schedule than Indiana does as things currently sit. And they've looked a lot better in all of their games they've played. They really haven't ever felt like they were out of control of a football game. Maybe you go to the Penn State game this past week when it was 17-14 at halftime, but I even go back to their only one possession win, which was against Texas in the opening week, 7-14. But you go back and you watch that game, and you don't feel like Texas is going to win that football game. It feels like Ohio State was able to control and dictate the tempo of that game and how they wanted to play it. So if you want to poke arguments in that, they're going to play. Like
Right.
that's I think the most important thing is people not get too worked up. They're going to play. They're going to play
Mhm.
each other. You're going to figure this thing out as it goes out, and it works a lot of itself out. And you're going to end up probably in a very similar scenario that you were in last year, where you get to the end of the year,
Mhm.
you have a cluster of teams hanging around that 11-12 area,
Right.
even 10, 11, 12. Because right now, the way the bracket shakes out, if it were to end today, is both 11 and 12 are left out of the playoff because you got
Mhm.
to fit an ACC champion and a group of 6 champion in there as well.
Right. Right now, given what we've seen, who's the best team in the ACC?
I think you would have to go with Virginia right now,
Okay.
um, just because I mean they do carry the best the best loss, I guess, because
Right.
Miami dropped like a rock as well in the playoff in the committee's
Mhm.
first rankings, and it's
Mhm.
indicative of kind of the way Miami's gone about their years. They started
Right.
out really strong, but down the stretch they've started to falter, and so you see that reflection in their rankings. They're not playing as well, so they're not ranked as high. If they had had another like a weird loss at SMU, then maybe you could excuse it. But this is a team that has consistently gotten worse. It feels like so. You saw that reflective in their rankings, and when you go Virginia and Louisville, which are the two highest ranked teams by the committee right now,
Mhm.
Virginia holds the head to head over Louisville in
Right.
an overtime win in Louisville. So that's what carries the difference right now between those two teams, and as it should. I also
Mhm.
got to give credit to Tony Elliott and what he's done at Virginia this year. I don't think anybody would have had them in the top half of the ACC, much less competing for the ACC title into November.
You bring up an interesting point about Virginia, and if you've ever been there, or if anything about the ACC, uh, Virginia hasn't been very aggressive in football. They haven't spent any money in that area, despite the fact that Virginia's got one of the most recruitable states in the country,
Mm-hmm.
especially down in the Norfolk and in that area down there. A lot of professional and college football players come out of there. The Virginia's basically an academic institution that has sports. They really view themselves that way. So to actually, they're kind of like a Vanderbilt in that regard. Um,
Mm-hmm.
so anytime they make a bowl, they're excited. Now
Yeah.
they've got a team that is pretty damn impressive, and something to be proud of. Um, and they're starting to get people into the stands, and that's fantastic. But at the end of the day, expectations in Virginia aren't what they might be in Clemson or Florida State, or other spots in the state, in the conference. So for them to be up there, I mean, I think that just goes to prove how, to your point, how coaching and recruiting can put a team on the map that most people wouldn't even have thought of.
Yeah, and like people will bring up the analytics and stuff like that, and they're important. But you win the games that you play, and right
Hmm.
now Virginia's beaten pretty much everybody in front of them, save the one loss.
Right.
I went back and actually I just looked up the ACC preseason poll.
Hmm.
Virginia Tech was picked to finish 14th out of 17 teams in the league. So it's a similar case to last year what Arizona State was. They started out the
Right.
year, they were voted last in the preseason poll, Big 12.
Hmm.
Last year, they went on a run, ended up making the college football playoff. Virginia's kind of positioned themselves in a similar spot with all their work ahead. Their fate lies in their own hands. If Virginia Tech wins out, Virginia Tech's going to be in the college football playoff.
Right. Excuse me. Excuse me.
Plus,
Thank you. I don't know. I think that this is going to be a very interesting ACC and Big 12 run to the stretch here. the parity in the conference of both of them, in some ways is a good thing, but in other ways, you know, really does potentially give them grief as to how they get into the playoffs and who gets into the playoffs from is it going to be the best team in the ACC that makes it, or the best team in the Big 12 make it, or is it going to be the team that wins the title?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's going to be curious because they talk about they you kind of have to break it down in terms of conferences, and when
Mm-hmm.
you're talking about how many bids a conference is going to get,
Right.
you know that the Big Ten and the SEC are going to get their lion's share.
Mm-hmm.
But after you move past them, you start talking about who's going to get multiple bids behind the
Right.
SEC and the Big Ten.
Mm-hmm.
It's a race that the Big 12 and the ACC kind of jockey back and forth with.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and right now the Big 12 is better positioned to get two teams than the
Mm-hmm.
ACC is. Right now the ACC's their two highest are 14th and 15th. Big 12's 8 and 9 with
Mm-hmm.
BYU and Texas Tech respectively. And they I think that the ACC does have a bit of a parity problem. The
Mm-hmm.
like Virginia Tech, I said their work's still ahead of them. They've still got to go on the road to play Duke. And if you
Mm-hmm.
look at ESPN's matchup predictor and the way they have it set right now,
Mm-hmm.
Duke's favored to win in that football game right now.
Hmm.
So they have they don't have a peak and a valley difference large enough. It
Mm-hmm.
feels like the ACC right now to be able to have a group that separates themselves in a way where you could get multiple teams in. The,
Yeah. Go ahead. I'm
they
sorry.
they did it last year with SMU because
Right.
SMU popped and had a fantastic season,
Mm-hmm.
and Clemson won the title. That they're not in a similar spot this year. The Big 12 is much better positioned with
Mm-hmm.
BYU and Texas Tech, and also some of the teams behind them that aren't ranked as low as some of those other ACC schools.
Mm-hmm. Well, and just like we talked about, early about the CFP rankings, you know, the Big 12 and the ACC have a lot of football left to be played. So what now looks like a lock for the Big 12 may end up being, things may switch around. Um, I'm not saying it's going to happen, but it certainly could. And we all saw what last year. What they had 5 teams that, going into the last 2 weeks, any one of those 5 teams could have been in the playoffs.
Yeah, it's interesting just because like you look at the way they've ranked them, and I
Mm-hmm.
said Virginia's at 14. Guess who's ahead of Virginia?
Who?
Utah at 13.
UConn?
Utah.
Oh,
Utah's
Utah. I'm sorry. They said
Yeah,
UConn.
Utah's sitting at 13. So the committee's already told you that
Mm-hmm.
Utah with 2 losses, they feel like is a better football team than both Virginia and Louisville, who are sitting right behind them at the top of the ACC, both carrying
Mm-hmm.
1 loss themselves.
Well, that might be the case. But we'll see. We'll see. It'll play itself out from that standpoint.
Hmm.
Um, Now you're talking to your buddies. The SEC. I mean, you can't. They got a lot of people in that top 25.
Yeah, they do, and it, it's something where a lot of the top of the SEC has already played.
Mm-hmm.
Like the SEC has a very much a path to where all of these teams they don't have to play each other, with the
Right.
exception of whoever's going to play in the SEC title. Georgia and Ole Miss have already played.
Mm-hmm.
A&M and Alabama don't play.
Mm-hmm.
Ole Miss and Alabama don't play. Georgia and Alabama have already played, and Georgia and A&M don't play. So
Right.
your top 4 in the SEC are sitting pretty. Outside of that, now you're worried if you're the SEC and you're Greg Sankey. You're like, all right, well, who's going to be on upset alert? Not to
Right.
mention you've got Texas and you've got Oklahoma sitting right there at 11 and 12 on the outside
Right.
looking in. So the SEC is in pretty good position. I think people may the Big Ten backfilled a lot of the top 25, which I thought was interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Because people talk about the depth of the SEC versus the depth of the Big Ten, and the Big Ten has some solid depth on the back end. But I think what's most telling about the SEC is kind of where their depth lies. Is
Mm-hmm.
it feels like you're kind of in the top 25, and then you fall off a bit of a cliff, and all those teams that are unranked right now,
Yeah.
or looking for head coaches.
Yeah. Speaking of that, Um, it looks like LSU. I'm sorry, Auburn. Looks like Auburn has set their sights on Coach, Coach Summerall at Tulane.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that doesn't surprise me a whole lot. He was formerly at Troy, so
Right.
he's a guy that's built some really good relationships in Alabama and at
Mm-hmm.
Auburn. And they've just missed on their last two. It felt
Mm-hmm.
like they overthought it a lot, at least with in terms of Hugh Freeze. Hugh Freeze didn't.
Mm-hmm.
He came in there and he didn't do what's required of an SEC head coach. The
Right.
same can be said for Brian Kelly. We talk about these guys and what their timely demises are. Is
Mm-hmm.
well, you got Brian Kelly sitting on a beach in peak recruiting season. You got Hugh Freeze playing golf every Sunday at 1:30 p.m.
Right.
These guys want the job, and I'm not saying that what they did in the office wasn't their best. But what I'm saying is I don't think they made the entire time commitment that was necessary in order to be successful in the SEC. John Summerall doesn't fit that build
Right.
for everything that you know about John Summerall. So he's got ties to Alabama. He's well connected in the state of Alabama in terms of high school coaching.
Mm-hmm.
He knows him well, and that's really important to recruit the state of Alabama. It was Brian Harson's demise at Auburn. There was that he refused seemingly to really get connected into the state. Um, he would fit all the boxes. They still have to get the deal done. The season has to end, and John Summerall has to
Right.
make sure he's not playing in a college football playoff first.
Mm-hmm.
But if it does, I think it would be a very good fit between the two of them.
Yeah. And the thing was, to your point about Alabama, there were a lot of Alabama alum and also a lot of Alabama, um, inside the bubble, if you will, who who wanted John Summerall to coach Alabama instead of you know the people that were on their list. And when Coach DeBoer got it, there were a lot of people that were there was a backlash. There was kind of like, wait a minute, Summerall's should have been our guy.
Yeah.
But the people, the athletic director, all that, they were looking at, well, wait, no, we're not going down to a G5 school and grabbing a coach and putting him in Alabama. But I agree with you. Summerall can coach anywhere. I don't know where, from that standpoint, um, he would have. I think he would have been just as good, if not better, than DeBoer at Alabama because of just what you said, his relationships.
hmm Yeah, and you look at the build of these guys
Mm-hmm.
that are that end up working out when they go head coach to head coach. It's not these guys that are
Mm-hmm.
going from big program to big program. I like the guys that have pedigree of success at different levels and different stops. He did it at Troy. He was successful at Troy. Now he's done it at Tulane. He's been successful there as well. So when they're able to cultivate and build a resume of success at different stops in the same position, then what I've talked about in terms of the big hire and why I thought it can be a mistake is because it's hard to replicate and move your culture and what you build at a certain place to different places. What John Summerall has proved throughout his time as a head coach at different places is that what he builds, he can move. He can take a culture that he built at Troy and he can move it to Tulane. I think the same way he can build a culture at Tulane and he can move it to Auburn if he so chose.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's really important when you go into the hiring process of these guys and not just plucking a big name like a Hugh Freeze. While Hugh Freeze was successful, but he had problems that he followed him everywhere. And there's a different level of success that Summerall's had at his G5 stops versus what Freeze did in
Mm-hmm.
his time outside of the P4.
Yeah, and with regard to uh, the deal, um, the deal that interested me about Freeze was um, they got him from Liberty, right?
Yeah, they did.
And and not to throw shade on Liberty, but you're jumping from not not one of the P5 quality conferences. You're jumping down there and grabbing him for what he did, at a school that has trouble finding opponents to play.
Yeah, yeah. It was an interesting choice whenever they hired Freeze. It was one that I wasn't a huge fan of. I didn't think that was gonna just change, but he came in and recruited well.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's telling just how well Auburn recruited under Hugh Freeze when you had the buy-in that he had. If you got somebody in there that knows the state of Alabama well, like John Summerall did, and is willing to
Right.
commit the hours, it shows how Auburn can recruit. And like they can you can win at Auburn. I think people tend to forget that because they lived in Alabama's shadow for pretty much their entire existence. And I don't think there's anything that Auburn's going to do. I don't think it's possible if they went out there over the next 10 years and we're better than Alabama year in and year out. I'm still not sure they would like unseat Alabama as big brother per se in the state.
Mm-hmm.
So you do have that hanging over your head in terms of the Auburn job, is
Mm-hmm.
that you are not the flagship program of the state. That's never going to change. Um, but it's a place that you can win at. A lot of people have won at it. Gene Chizik won a national championship
Mm-hmm.
there. Gus Malzahn was a national runner-up when he was there. So there's a history of winning at Auburn, but they have to find the right guy because when they fired Gus Malzahn, it just turned into a mess. So it's very important that they have a much more defined coaching search this time around, and
Yep.
a much tighter group of people involved in the coaching search to keep some of the outside opinions outside. And if they do that, I think they'll probably end up in a better spot. And honestly, the way they've recruited, as long as they're able to retain some talent, they're probably going to be able to compete relatively quickly in the SEC.
Mm-hmm.
They're one of three teams that hasn't given up 24 points, but they couldn't field an offense this year. So, it didn't matter that they haven't been able to give up 24, that they haven't given up 24 points. They can't score 24 points.
Mm-hmm. You keep losing 24-17,
Mm-hmm.
um, which is not a sustainable situation. Um, let's talk for a moment now as we move forward on the college level um, to the NFL and their sudden you know, there's, I guess, the better way of putting it is there's they got Georgia, they got Germany on their mind. It seems like they want to go into Germany um, and perhaps expand from Berlin to some of the other cities, Munich, and so some of the others, um, so that European situation that they're building may very well we may very well see four games for instance, four games in England, a game in Mexico City, a game in Brazil, and then maybe two or three games in Germany.
Yeah. Well, Jim, as we've well chronicled when we talk about it, we love the international games. Big fans of the international games. Playing
Right.
ball at 9:30 in the morning. Big fans of it. That's sarcasm. I know I sometimes can sound. I don't change my tone when I do that, but it, I don't know. I don't get it. Like and I'm not going to get it. The NFL can throw whatever they want to throw at me until there's like some massive statistical data to back up these games in these international countries and like really large substantial growth in these international countries. I don't understand taking these games away from normal time slots in America. And maybe that's what they're doing, is maybe because of the way the NFL and their TV deals work is you really only get, like, unless you've got red zone, you get you may get two games per window. You may get the
Mm-hmm.
CBS and the Fox game in both the 1 o'clock and the 4 to 4:30 window that they have. But that's it. So maybe what they're trying to do is they're trying to increase the overall viewership of the league entirely. But I just don't feel like 9:30 is your window to do 9:30 in the morning is your window to do that.
No, and you pity the people out on the West Coast because let's say you're a Rams fan or a Chargers fan or a 49ers fan, and you guys are playing in over in Europe. You're talking 6:30 in the morning for a kickoff.
Yeah, that's never going to work. But I'm I'm more okay with, still not a fan of, the international games if they feature East Coast teams exclusively. I think that's something that they need to do. And I get that you want to, like we need to expose, Europe to all of our teams and all of our brands, and everybody needs to go over there and play a game. Otherwise, it feels like it's unfair for a certain subset of the teams,
Mm-hmm.
what have you. But it's just not, like, it's not reasonable to send the West Coast teams one that far. Like, because you're talking about with LA, if I remember correctly, when they went to play in, were they playing in Germany or London?
They were playing in London and they stopped and practiced at Camden Yards in Baltimore.
Yeah, but they were gone for the better part of a week, and
Yeah.
you know, if you take the football part out of it, is now you're asking these guys to go on the road for an entire week away from their families, just because you might introduce a couple more thousand fans, this week. It feels unfair for those teams in the West Coast in terms of travel. It feels unfair for the teams on the West Coast in terms of their fan base, and so it just seems like an overall confusing move to send teams from the West Coast out there. And as they continue, or whenever they decide to restructure the way they do the international games, I think that only including East Coast teams feels like a fair assessment. And when I say East Coast teams, I'm not talking like they just need to be in the East time zone. Like Indianapolis is going over there this week to play Atlanta,
Mm-hmm.
so Indianapolis seems like fair game. That's you know it's
That's
one
an
hour
8:30 kick
difference.
if you're a Colts
Yeah.
fan.
Yeah, it's a 1 hour difference. It's still not fun. It's still not what you don't want to have to wake up at 8:30 in the morning to watch your team play football on a
Mhm.
Sunday, but it's not unreasonable. So
No.
I think that's fine.
Well, the thing too that the NFL is doing, which they're hoping will placate the players and the families, is we talked about these. This is the NFL's version of a bowl game, and so there's a lot of the guys who go over and take their families with them.
Hmm.
And so it's like and the NFL is footing the bill for the whole thing. And there's, once they get there, they get treated like kings because the city is happy to have them. And,
Unless you're
it's,
Skylar Thompson.
yeah, that's true too. Um, and I remember when they played their first, I think it was the first game they played there in that new stadium in Berlin was Brady was with the Buccaneers. And he just came back raving about how the fans were so nice to him and to the family and to the team and how much they enjoyed it. And I guess for some, that change of scenery and going and visiting a foreign country is whenever you're treated that way, uh, may or may not make it worth it, but for some it does. And regardless of what's happening here, as we know, in the 2029-2030 season, um, the NFL can opt out of their contracts, their TV contracts, which we know they will do, and they want, as we've said here a number of times, they want that 9:30 window to be, a consistent. I don't know if they're going to get to the 8 games that they had considered, but they're going to go for as close as they can get to it.
Hmm. How many do they play overseas now? Is it five, six,
6, yeah,
six?
6.
Yeah, it's six too many.
Yeah, well, unfortunately, I don't think we're gonna have. Uh, I,
Yeah,
I don't think that that's gonna change the dynamics. I think they're gonna go with what they got, and
yeah,
regardless of what we particularly care to have them do.
yeah. No,
Um,
they won't be moving backwards.
no, no, they think that this is a winner for them. I'm not certain, frankly. I mean, I get the Mexico City thing because the 49ers, the both LA teams and the Raiders have a really strong uh, relationship with Mexican fans, and their games are broadcast. The 49ers radio network has, as does the Raiders. I mean, they all have Spanish speaking outlets throughout Mexico. So they've got fan bases in Mexico. So that tracks pretty well. Um, their situation with regard to going to Europe was, after the failed situation where they put together the NFL Europe, that when they actually had a league. I guess what I'm curious about is, okay, I get the fact that you want to go to England, you want to go to Mexico City, you want to go to Germany. Um, they're even kicking around the possibility of playing in France. I've wondered why they didn't uh, look into Toronto or Montreal or Vancouver or some of the team, uh, some of the Canadian cities who uh, are very big when it comes to. I mean, Vancouver. There's a lot of Seahawks fans in Vancouver. There's a lot of Buffalo Bills fans in Toronto. There's, you know, Patriots fans in Montreal. I mean, so I don't understand why they're not, encroaching in that area. I don't. They've had
Mhm.
a chance two or three times to buy the CFL, and didn't do it. So I'm interested into why. Okay, I get you want to expand the global band, but by the way, you could just do like baseball did and put a one or two teams um, in Canada and see how that works.
hmm And I think the funny thing is the two leagues that have done it, those teams have had pretty good success,
Yeah.
relatively speaking. Raptors, NBA champions in 2019. Blue Jays
Hmm.
made the World Series this year.
Hmm.
Blue Jays, multi-time World Series winners. So they've had success. Those teams that have gone up there. Not only have they had success, but they've got a really strong following up there as well. The
Hmm.
Raptors are loved in Toronto, and so are the Blue Jays. And
Hmm.
those are countrywide teams. Like if you're into Major League Baseball, the odds are, unless you're over there close to Seattle in
Hmm.
Canada, that you're probably going to be a Toronto fan. The
Hmm.
same goes for basketball. So they have essentially a country's worth of backing that they could act on, and a league that's already established up there, and
Hmm.
has a foundation and a fan base that they haven't acted on. It is puzzling that they love this international movement, yet they're not willing to go up into Canada.
And just for the sake of what we're talking about here, the Montreal Expos move from Montreal down to DC. Um, I I really I went up there a couple times to work on what's going on in that whole routine, the backstory, right?
Hmm
Um, Montreal has always been a good baseball town.
Yeah.
And it wasn't that the Montreal didn't have fans. They had fans. It was that the Olympic Stadium wasn't built for baseball, and it was terrible to go. If you went there, it was terrible to try to watch a baseball game there because the sight lines were bad, and it was not it wasn't a Major League Baseball stadium. It was an Olympic stadium. So
hmm
there was that, and every time they got closer and closer to building something in downtown, somebody would screw it up, and so they had poor ownership a couple of times. And had it not been for the 1994 strike, um, they probably would have gotten that stadium. That was their best shot. But the way the league handled it by selling the team to Jeff Loria, who had absolutely no interest in keeping the team in Montreal, then Major League Baseball considering actually contracting the team, and then finally deciding, okay, well, we'll move them to DC. All the way along that route, I mean, they just basically forgot that Montreal had fans, and that I think was one of the biggest criminal situations that the sport of Major League Baseball has ever made in in not rewarding Montreal by letting them try to figure out a way to stay there. They never gave them that opportunity. They, you'll hear lip service or, oh well, they weren't going to build stadiums. Well, that's because every 10 minutes, they would have Major League Baseball would find an owner who, when they came in, said the first option they want to do is to move the team.
Mm-hmm.
So if Jeff Loria would have, and there's a little hanky panky here too, because Jeff Loria owned Montreal. Well, they wanted John Henry, who was owning, the owner of the Marlins, to lead the group for the Red Sox, and
Mm-hmm.
Tom Warner from San Diego. So how do we do this? Well, we make Warner's and John Henry, the leading buyers for the Red Sox. Well, they have to sell Miami, so they sell Miami and they sell it to Loria. That means baseball takes over the Expos, and they decide either we're going to contract them or we're going to move them themselves, which they did, and so the whole dynamic was an organizational thing within Major League Baseball to get John Henry and to get Tom Warner in as the Red Sox owners.
Mm.
And the irony of all this is they weren't even the top bidder. And it was an open bid because the Yaki family has a foundation. So they wanted obviously they wanted the highest bid to go to the Yaki Foundation. Well, the highest bid was Chuck Dolan, and it wasn't close. But in the quote unquote interest of baseball, they they picked John Henry and Tom Warner to own the team.
Wow.
So there was a lot of palace intrigue on that one.
Mm-hmm.
Um, you know, so Montreal was in the wrong place, wrong time with what Major League Baseball wanted to do.
Yeah. That gives me more of a recent one. I don't know the back workings of how everything went down. You may
Mhm.
have a better idea of this. But the Oakland Athletics didn't struggle with their fan support because they didn't have fans in Oakland. The Oakland Athletics struggled with fan support because they put the worst product on the field year in and year out. And now they're moving to Las Vegas, and they have to spend a stint in Sacramento on the way to it. It felt like more of a people wanted out of Oakland than the Oakland problem itself with the A's moving.
Well, on that one, the A's had been for sale since the 70s. Okay.
Hmm.
Um, in the relocation battle, every time anybody was talking about relocation, the first team that popped up were the A's. And you know, Billy Ball, or Billy Bean, when he was there, I mean, you have to give him credit for he kind of did what the Rays are doing now, which is basically win on a small payroll,
Hmm.
and he would do that. He did pretty well in that regard. The fans were loyal fans, but you know, I can honestly tell you that when the time comes to blow up the Oakland Coliseum, I will be happy to be there and push the plunger myself. It is a horrible stadium, and they retrofitted for the Raiders, screwing the A's. So it just turned out that once again baseball forgets the fans. They give ownership to people who don't give a damn about the fans and just want to make money. And by the way, I don't think that the Oakland A's are going to end up in San Francisco. I'm sorry, in Las Vegas. Um, I think they'll end up maybe perhaps in Sacramento,
Wow.
because
Um,
that stadium deal, they broke ground. That
mhm.
stadium deal almost requires the A's to sell out every one of their home games to make it work.
Yeah.
And
Jeez.
that's never going to happen. And
No.
they still, the they still are about $700 million apart on the ownership group, the Fisher family, and
Mm-hmm.
the city of Las Vegas on who's going to pay for the cost overruns of the stadium. Well, if you can't get that resolved now, it's just going to, anybody who has a house realizes that whenever you go to build something or renovate something and you put it off for a while, it's going to cost you more.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So I don't, I'm not so certain that, that deal in Vegas is going to be one that ends up actually coming to fruition. I wouldn't be surprised because Sacramento has said it many times. They're willing to put down the money to build a new stadium for them.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know. I mean, I would say that there might be. If I had to put odds on, I'd say maybe 60-40, 60-40 that they go to Vegas, which isn't what the Major League Baseball thought was going to happen.
Mm-hmm. That raises a question: is if that Vegas deal falls through,
Hmm.
is there a situation where the MLB could be looking at forcing a sale of the Athletics?
Um, the short answer is yes.
I kind of figured it's a that ownership group has been very stingy with their money throughout, and if it's their stinginess that costs them the having a baseball team in Las Vegas, I could very much see that angering the people at the MLB offices.
My The problem too is if you do find a buyer, right?
Hmm.
Where are they going to go?
Yeah.
They don't have a stadium deal in Oakland, and the idea of starting that back up is pretty much a non-starter because they've already told the city of Oakland and said, thanks but no thanks.
Hmm.
There's Portland and Salt Lake City who are in pretty good position to take them on, but the problem with that is when you take a potential expansion franchise deal away,
Hmm.
um, the league loses out on a potential $4 billion cash flow.
Yeah.
So if they were to move, and they've already waived the the fee that the Fisher family would have to pay to relocate, they've already waived that fee. So for all intents and purposes, let's say they go to Salt Lake City, um, Major League Baseball makes very little off that deal,
Yeah.
as opposed to making $4 billion if that's a franchise that goes up there and is brand new.
Yeah.
So expansion, I mean, theoretically, you could move them to Portland, sell the franchise, the franchise fee go to Salt Lake City, and then you go to the East Coast and it's either Nashville or Raleigh or a number of areas that are in the mix for that. If when that comes, right?
Yeah.
When the time comes. So I, as I said, the short answer to your question is yeah, they could do what they did with Stu Sternberg and say, Stu, we're kind of, and this is the ownership now, not the commissioner, because the
Hmm.
commissioner works for Major League Baseball. Then he doesn't make these decisions on his own.
Yeah.
They're the owners for both in Major League Baseball were so pissed at both the A's and the Rays that they just looked at Manfred and said, "Fix it, just fix it. We want to get two more teams in here, and just I don't care what you have to do, go in there and fix it."
Yeah.
So Manfred went down to Tampa and worked with Sternberg and said, "Look, Stu, you had a stadium deal in place, then you walked away from it. The money was there. He walked away from it,
Hmm.
and you know what? It's might be time for you to consider leaving." And remember that he paid $350 million for the franchise and sold it for 2.7 billion.
Yeah.
So it's not like
He's
crying
doing all
for
right.
me, right? and his baseball operations people are among the best in baseball as far as identifying talent and keeping them for a while until they get sold off to another team. Um, but the same thing was over in Oakland. It was like you had the two Bay areas, San Francisco and Tampa Bay, as the problem children for Major League Baseball. So
Mhm.
the only reason that the owners waived the fee is like, good God, just get them out of Oakland and get them to someplace where they might be able to, make some money.
Yeah.
So yeah, and I do feel bad for the Oakland fans because there are a lot of Oakland fans,
Hmm. Yeah.
and it's just sad whenever that the owner is not going to put any money into the team. And the
Yeah.
whole concept of he keeps turning down stadium deal after stadium deal. They had a waterfront deal that went south because Fisher didn't want to pay, additional money for that, and that would have been a beautiful situation, almost like San Francisco, where they would have been on the bay and in a new stadium, and I I would imagine without any problem they would have drawn very well.
Hmm.
But
I
when you've got an owner that scuttles every possible deal that you can make, that's not a recipe for success.
yeah, I wonder with the ownership groups if they view some of these ownership groups seem to view baseball or at least their teams as these things that make them money annually, and that's really all they are. Like
Hmm.
they see them as green in the financials, and that's all they care. They don't want to sink more money into it. As long as it's green every year, then they're good, and they don't want to spend money on it. And that's not a healthy thinking in terms of the health for Major League Baseball as a whole, because you have these teams that now you're looking at a situation where you're probably not going to have an on-time start to Major League Baseball, not this next year, but the year after, because you've got all these teams that are like, well, look at what the Dodgers are doing. Like, look at how much better that. This is why we need a salary cap. We don't. Baseball doesn't need a salary cap. People feel like baseball needs a salary cap because there's what feels like a third of ownership in Major League Baseball. I know it's not a third, but it sure does feel like it. That just doesn't seem to care about their product that they're putting out on the field as long as it's making them money.
They need a salary floor.
Yes. Yeah, they don't need a cap, they need a floor. That's their problem.
I don't look the the Dodgers will pay out to Major League Baseball approximately 170 to 175 million dollars. Okay, the the contract that they did with Otani, which is a deferred contract, the $700 million one, they literally made back in a year. So to write a check to Major League Baseball for $175 million is not a problem for the Dodgers.
It's not because you also factor in, the fact that they make the World Series and they make the postseason and all these jersey sales
Mm-hmm.
and the guys that they're signing, in particular this recent run of signing all these guys from Japan,
Mm-hmm.
is they're building a larger fan base and they're
Mm-hmm.
creating success year in and year out. Like those postseason games, those World Series games, all those are more ticket sales. Like
Mm-hmm.
that's not something that you can. Although they probably did at the start of their year, you can't bank on making the playoffs and making it as deep as they
No.
did year in and year out, and that's more money in their pocket as well. So when they invest in the team and the team does well, you get a fantastic return on investment. But a lot of people, again, these people that buy these teams, they aren't baseball people. They don't care about baseball, and so they just see it as something that's going to make them money without really having to put all that much into it.
Well, and in fairness to the Dodgers, and in some cases the Yankees and the Red Sox do this as well. Um, the fact that you have success doesn't mean that you buy everybody. And I say that to say this, that the Dodgers continually have one of the top five minor league organizations in baseball. You
Yeah.
know, they continue to draft well. They continue to go and find kids. So, okay, fine, they sign a major name, but they also have three other kids that, that play that you don't know who they are, but they came out of the Dodger farm system.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, I don't think that, most of these teams put money back in there. So are they paying for the old um, are they buying titles? Well, if that were the case, the Mets would be the champions.
Yeah.
So no, they're not buying titles. They're investing money and they're making money. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
look at how much money that the Fenway group that I just talked about with Warner and John Henry. Look at how, I mean, they have branched out to they own Liverpool, for God's sake.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the Fenway Sports Group.
Right,
That's
they own a NASCAR team.
yeah, that's honestly it's been a really big like I don't think probably from 2019 up until this year. I'm not sure
Hmm.
if John Henry, maybe 2021. I'm not sure if John Henry felt safe showing his face in Boston with the lack of spending that they did on the team.
Right.
It was such like was is probably still will be until you really they reach the World Series again. To be honest with you, because
Hmm.
that's the expectation. Boston is World Series. Um, they're going to get criticized for their spending. They will. Like that that's what it comes with in those big markets. But spending doesn't always do it. But you look at the teams that win it, like
Hmm.
this year, the World Series was between the number 1 team in payroll and the number 5 team in payroll with the
Right.
Dodgers and the Blue Jays. Like you have to spend money in order to be successful in
Hmm.
baseball. That's just never going to change. Yes, you
No.
can have these teams that like are they build a good chemistry and they come together and they do a lot more than you're expecting. But
Hmm.
guess what? When you look at the books on those teams that have came together and really do more than you're expecting,
Hmm.
still spend a lot of money on the players that came together.
Hmm. And even if you're in that mid level, right, of spending, if you do it wisely, and you don't overpay, and you find your people, to build the franchise with or around, you're really just looking for one or two players, right? You're if you've got a good core group and you pick maybe a pitcher and maybe a couple of guys, good bats, you got a good chance. And that's the part that was surprising to me, is that we see these teams. I mean, look at the Brewers. I mean, Brewers, they're a mid-level team, but they spend money, and not as much as others, but they're investing money in their franchise.
Yeah.
And the Cardinals have done it for years. The Reds are starting to do it. Um, they're they're basically just trying to do the best they can, and they've got payrolls, and they're doing fine. I mean, the Reds was a feel that was a feel good story this year,
Mm-hmm.
to see Cincinnati make it.
Mm-hmm.
Even better that it did happen, and they knocked the Mets out. So you got a twofer on that one.
Yep.
Um, but yeah, I think that was a lot of fun to see, you know, a team. And when I was growing up, the Big Red Machine was, they just booked postseason every year,
Mm-hmm.
and to see Cincinnati baseball back was fantastic.
Yeah. Like what resonates in my mind when you talk about some of these small markets, like think back to I think it was 2011 and that
Hmm.
playoff game between Cincinnati and Pittsburgh.
Hmm.
You go back and I was relatively young, about 9 years old. But I've went back and I've
Make
seen
me
some
feel really old now, Matt. Thanks a lot. I appreciate it.
um, but but I went back and I've seen a bunch of videos from it, and like Pittsburgh is sold out, and like people are amped up, and it's a great atmosphere, and it's a really good game, and it doesn't matter what the logos are. It doesn't matter that those are two smaller market
Hmm.
teams. I use small market sparingly because Pittsburgh's not exactly just a teeny tiny market in and of itself.
No.
They've got a history of success across their different teams,
Hmm.
in both the Steelers and the Penguins. So they have success in their history too, and it's a really good game. But it's a game that you don't get because it, albeit Cincinnati made it this year, but Pittsburgh doesn't invest in their team. Cincinnati invests, but they don't invest heavily. So it's these. There are good matchups out there, and there are passionate fans out there that may not get to always showcase it due to the spending that's predetermined by their ownership.
I'll tell you, probably if I had to rank, passion and sports to their sports teams, I would say that you absolutely have to put Pittsburgh in the top five.
Yeah.
They sell out the Penguins games. They sell out the Steelers games. They still even go to the Pirates games, knowing that Paul Skeens or somebody else. They're basically just grooming them to be sent somewhere else.
Mm-hmm.
The TV ratings for Pirates games, the TV ratings for Penguins games, the TV ratings for Steeler games are absolutely consistently in the top 10 in all of whatever sport they're involved in.
Mm-hmm.
So the fans would love to see, the teams that they had in the 70s that fought with the Cincinnati Reds. Um, you know, but because it's still down to ownership. It's what it is, and if you're not going to spend money, you can't expect the fans to go there. But anybody who doesn't think Pittsburgh's a good baseball town is crazy. And the
Mm-hmm.
stadium itself is gorgeous.
Yes.
It's one of the top three in Major League Baseball.
Yeah. I think something that's really telling is if you want to like get a litmus test on where a fan base would be if you gave them a good product.
Mm-hmm.
I would like to people to think about the AFC North
Mm-hmm.
and that division of football.
Mm-hmm.
It's widely considered one of the best divisions in football
Mm-hmm.
year in year out. This is a little bit of a down year for them. I'll give them that, but
Mm-hmm.
you still see the fan support across those leagues, and they are a part of really some of the best rivalries in the NFL
Mm-hmm.
and what you can call rivalry games. And then you look at those four cities, and you've got four of the cheapest owners in baseball,
Right.
and the Orioles, the Reds, the Pirates, and the Guardians. Like
Mm-hmm.
the Guardians make their run, but it's not because they're just handing out cash.
Right.
It's because of what they've built in terms of their program. So I think it's telling that if these owners were to invest, those teams in particular, at least, that there is going to be fan support for them. You saw that in Baltimore. You saw it when they made their run a
Mm-hmm.
couple of years ago. Like they're fans that are hungry for really good baseball in Baltimore. There are fans that are
Mm-hmm.
really hungry for good baseball in Cincinnati and Cleveland and Pittsburgh too.
Mm-hmm.
They're just not always treated to it because of the ownership.
And you bring up four cities that are surprisingly very much alike:
Mm-hmm.
Baltimore and Pittsburgh and Cleveland, and to a lesser extent Cincinnati, but still there. Uh, I mean, these are cities that blue collar towns, right?
Mm-hmm.
They're they were built on manufacturing. The guys who do the factories and build things, and that whole situation. So the passion, the ability to get away from whatever problem you had, or basically just the fact that I want to go home and relax, grab a beer and watch a game. That is, that's the ethos of those cities, and they love their pro football teams. They love their baseball teams, and they are passionate about the fans. I mean, it's just so crazy that baseball doesn't have some sort of salary, floor that says, damn it, you're going to spend money. You're making it, so spend it.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that they would be rewarded. And you're right. If you look at those four fan bases for football alone, right?
Yeah.
How bad has the Browns been for years? Yet they sell
Horrible.
every seat in that building out.
Yep.
And of course Baltimore and Pittsburgh have had great success. I've actually been, and I'll wrap it with this, in Paris, going down the street, and a guy's wearing a Steelers jacket, and I just said, excuse me, I just want to check it. I said, yeah, are you from Pittsburgh? He goes, well, I'm a Steelers fan, and I've in Western Pennsylvania. So, oh, that's cool. He says, I said, where are you in? And he says, I'm going to a Steelers bar. There's a Steelers bar in Paris.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, you just look at it and go, this is crazy. You know, the pirates of Willie Stargell and the lumber company in the late 70s were phenomenal baseball teams to watch. And they're gone. Now, will they ever come back? Who knows? But that's on baseball.
Yeah, absolutely. They have a problem, and
Mm-hmm.
they don't have it figured out yet, but they're going to get to in 2027.
They
So I
better.
just hope they don't vote for the. I saw somebody describe the salary cap, at least when it comes to baseball, as
Mm-hmm.
as sports communism, which I thought was a
Okay.
funny. So
Why is
I
it
guess
sports communism and all the other sports that have the caps?
yeah, the comparison that I think they were probably trying to draw is, I guess a very basic description of communism in that it's supposed to be fair, like essentially fair play for all.
Yeah.
Again, very basic definition.
In
So that would
in
be
theory, yes.
yeah, yeah. So that's I guess where they're coming from in terms of the salary cap.
Yeah, I suppose if you went to Webster's dictionary, that would be probably right there. Yeah.
Yeah, very basic, but yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it is. It's for the workers. Got it. So there you go. All right. Any final thoughts before we turn the page on communism? Before we get out of here.
The final thought that I have is one where we discussed the Braves hired Walt Weiss
Mm-hmm.
as their manager yesterday. He's made some coaching changes, both the first base coach, third base coach, and pitching coach. This is the most notable one. Pitching coach Rick Kranitz are out as a part of Weiss's staff changes. And I found that interesting. I'm going to be a little critical here of a guy who's now on day 2 of his job.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know why you fire Rick Kranitz. I understand you want to change some things. Pitching has not been the Atlanta Braves issue.
He's not going to be out of job for a while.
Yeah, no, pitching has not been the Atlanta Braves issue. For as long as he was there, I didn't think that it was going to be an issue. I mean, they've been, relatively speaking, a factory when it comes to arms. You think of Schwellenbach and Strider and some guys that they'd signed, but
Max Fried.
Yeah, Max Fried. He turned Reynaldo Lopez. That was a reliever they signed 2 years ago, and he was one of the better starters in the league when he was healthy a year ago. So he's did a fantastic job, and for a guy that's on day number 2 of his job, that was a very questionable firing or relieving of his duties that Walt Weiss made, especially considering he chose to keep the hitting coach.
Yeah, that's wild. Totally wild. And why is it normally before they fire the manager, they always fire a pitching coach or a hitting coach? It's like, well, today we fired the hitting coach. Like, okay,
yep, it's
got it.
It's the chain of command.
The team's not going to be any better, but all right, fine. Go ahead.
It's the same move as when you before you fire a coordinator, you fire a receivers coach or a linebackers coach. Then you fire a coordinator after you've tried firing a coordinator. Then you fire the head coach. If you go through a couple head coaches, then you fire the AD.
Right?
Yeah. So it's the chain of firing that they fell victim to.
Yeah, the circular firing squad. Oh, Lord. All right. Well, fair enough what you say about the Braves. Fair enough about the Braves. Rick will probably have a job before the end of the day with somebody else because they know what he can do. So we'll go from there. All right, bud. Have a great day, everybody. Thanks for joining us. We had a lot of fun today. And tomorrow we'll have some NFL football to talk about, and we'll have some fun college football to talk about.
Mm-hmm.
So until that time, everybody, have a great day, and thanks for joining us.